What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Mojo AI podcast. I'm Sam Bigelow. I'm the content manager at Mojo AI. Today, I'm here with Brian Camper, Director of Health and Safety. How's it going, Brian?
It's going really good, Sam. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's good. It's a nice warm day here in Utah. Glad to be out of the snow a little bit.
I feel you on that.
That's awesome. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Usually, with the Mojo AI podcast, we're covering some more evergreen topics about safety. Occasionally, we dip into AI, tech leadership, different stuff like that. But one thing that has come up, we see a ton of questions across the board about safety every week. It's
Right.
always changing, different things are always happening. So, what we want to do is every week, we want to dive into our mailbag, answer some questions straight from the safety pros. And as it comes up, whenever there's major news updates about the safety world, whether it's OSHA, various major cases of serious incidents and how they're being resolved, we want to be able to cover these in order to support safety managers and give them the information they need to make smart, intelligent decisions.
No, that's a really good point. And we got definitely a couple cool topics to talk about this week. And some of them are going to be a little bit charged that we got to navigate some waters and maintain a level of neutrality. But no, I'm really excited about this podcast and I'm really excited about the content we put together for this.
Definitely, yeah. So let's get into it. We're going to start up with the news. Today's first news story is the House of Representatives is proposing budget cuts for OSHA and other safety agencies in the next fiscal year. This is coming from Safety and Health magazine. So getting into it, so the House basically is seeking budget cuts for OSHA and other workplace safety agencies. The Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. That's a mouthful. But this bill allocates around a little over $550 million to OSHA. While that's a huge amount of money, it's actually a 12% reduction from the agency's current budget. Right now, they're working with a little over $630 million in their budget for this current fiscal year. So basically, what they're looking at, much like we're seeing across the entire government right now, their politicians, agencies are looking for ways to cut spending, to trim the fat a little bit. And other thing to note, we also have MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration. So this budget would actually cut about 5.2% of their budget as well. So we're seeing two major safety organizations. These organizations operate across the entire country. How do you think having less money to work with is going to affect these organizations?
Let's put this in context. When we say a ton of money, yes, $500 million is a lot of money to you and I, right? But when you think about what OSHA does and the effect that they have on the everyday workforce, $500 million spread out over 50 states, it's not like they have a huge budget to begin with, right? So any budget cut is going to have dramatic effects. Could it be that they are just trimming fat? Hopefully that's what you would hope, right? Maybe it's just administrative cost and it doesn't affect the enforcement. But if it is taking money away from OSHA as well as MSHA, that could have a lot of effects, right? That could be putting the burden a lot more onto the states, maybe it causing it to take more time to get inspections done or even complaints addressed. So hopefully these budget cuts are done with what OSHA's whole tactical work and what their whole goal to accomplish is. Hopefully these cuts are done with that in mind and not just done to join a bandwagon per se.
Like I said earlier, this isn't necessarily new. We've seen other major government departments get their budgets cut a little bit. If I remember correctly, the FBI lost some of their budget, and this resulted in a few community outreach programs being canceled. So, Brian, is there anything that OSHA puts together that they use to outreach to safety professionals, to people within high-risk industries that you think could potentially be affected?
Yeah, 100%. So OSHA actually has the OSHA outreach program as well as the VPP program. And hopefully those don't come under risk. Right now, there's 21 states that run their own OSHA program. And in order to have a state OSHA plan, you have to meet or exceed the federal OSHA guidelines or regulatories. So returning OSHA to the states instead of it being a federally directed and federally funded program, that's floating around out there too. That could have its pros and cons. I do want to talk about something real quick though about federal OSHA versus it being ran by the states. This might not be a horrible idea. When you think about it, the way technology has impacted our workforce, the way cultures, even state by state, are different. I've worked in several different states. If you go and you look at the industry in California, or you look at the industry in Arizona or even Nevada, they're vastly different, right? They're using different equipment, they're using different workforces, they're culturally different. So the state having its input on modifying and making its state specific OSHA plan might not be a horrible idea either. But again, it comes back to funding, who's going to pay for it, where that's going to come from. On the federal level, could some of the outreach programs be at risk? Absolutely. Hopefully, they really take into consideration what OSHA does and what they do really well. And that's make sure that our workforces are safe and our standards of working are there, and they're some of the best in the world.
Definitely. Getting into our second news item, you already mentioned it a little bit, Brian. We're coming from the HIPAA Journal, and this is written by Steve Alder over there. A congressman in the House of Representatives is looking to introduce a bill that would seek to abolish OSHA at the federal level. Representative Andy Biggs, he is in the House of Representatives for the state of Arizona. He has reintroduced a bill that seeks to abolish OSHA. If I remember correctly, Representative Biggs has been introducing a bill or similar bills to this over the last couple of years. He personally believes that the power that OSHA has should be given to the states, that safety would be better handled by those states and private employers on the grounds that states, employers, different places are maybe a little bit more familiar with the different risks and the different hazards that companies in that state are going to face. We've talked about this before, but many states like Arizona, very different than, say, Michigan in terms of various hazards that you're facing, especially like environmental hazards, the industries that are in those states. Different states rely a lot on forestry, some go into mining, many others have factories, and all of these are going to handle safety in different ways. While there may be some similarities, they're going to be different. But like you said, the two big questions that we have here are who's going to pay for it at the state level? And then how do you feel that safety in general would be affected by moving that down to the state level?
I'm always an optimist, right? And with the experience that I've been lucky enough to gather working throughout multiple states, I would want to look at it from rose colored glasses and say that it might actually end up being a positive if this does go through. Whilst I definitely don't want to see OSHA go away and we're not picking sides one way or the other, there is some truth that state level workforces and the way that we've designed industry and where industries have migrated to over time since the founding of OSHA is completely changed, and the way we do work has changed. Could Arizona, just because we talked about it, 70% of the world's copper comes out of Arizona, right? Heavily dependent on mining, that state. Could Arizona write legislators from Arizona and safety professionals and state representatives from Arizona? Could they write a better OSHA state level plan that's specific for OSHA than what maybe federal OSHA could do? Perhaps. That is a real possibility. But I think it's still important to make sure that there is a federal regulatory body that says you have to have XYZ in your plan, right? You have to have these modules of your OSHA plan. And then the state has to, again, like we've talked about before, meet or exceed that in order to have their own state plan. So I think it could be, I want to look at it from the optimist side, that there could be maybe some good things of this, if this does go through, that the states would take the opportunity to even more specialize their OSHA plans to protect their workers that work in their specific environments, their specific industries. Where there can be commonality, there's commonality, but we make sure that rather than covering everyone with the big blanket, each state is covered by their own one that fits specifically to them. So that's how I would look at it for now.
Definitely. And I think you hit the nail on the head with I think that is what Representative Biggs is going for. That one thing he cited is that Arizona as a state already has their own OSHA plan, and he's argued that they've seen really good success with that.
And they have.
So I think the main idea here is that within a state, they know what they need and they're able to more directly provide support for workers in that state in
Yeah,
order to keep them safe.
and just to give you a number on that too, so there's 21 states right now currently that have their own state level OSHA plan, as well as Puerto Rico. They have their own, they're a territory with their own level of OSHA plan that's specialized to their working environment. So again, we're not taking sides for or against abolishing OSHA, but we are stating that there is some precedence for it and that there are 21 states already that have their own state level plan specific to their industries and their workforce and their environments and their type of work that they do.
Definitely. And this is going to be an ongoing story for a little bit, either until the
Yeah.
bill passes or it gets killed. The entire legislative process is very long, it's winding. So we'll definitely keep people updated as things are happening and as this conversation evolves.
Well, I have enough information on this just to be dangerous. We can't say who, but we're going to have a guest come on and speak about this exact topic. They are very well versed in this and they might have a completely different mindset from me. And I think that's going to be really powerful and informative for our viewers.
Definitely. Our third and final news story for the week. This is coming from Yahoo News. It's written by Zach Roth. Caterpillar is currently challenging OSHA fine for violations in the death of a man at their Mapleton factory. The situation that we have here, it's still ongoing. Last year in June, a worker in Caterpillar's factory died when he was carrying molten metal and it spilled out, set him on fire. After OSHA inspected that, they found that Caterpillar had failed to ensure that the workplace was free of fire hazards that could cause death or serious injury, and that the company had also failed to ensure a suitable fall protection system. So basically, they were hit with a $30,000 fine, but Caterpillar is actually coming back and saying that while they were deeply saddened by that death, and to their credit, they've cooperated with authorities, but they are now trying to appeal that and saying that this was something that they couldn't control, that they were in fact providing proper protections. This was just an accident that they were unable to stop. What went wrong here? Obviously, you're working with really hot, volatile substances. What can be done to prevent an accident like this in the future?
We have to be a little bit careful because with this being an ongoing incident, right? But for a company like Caterpillar to appeal says that they probably feel pretty good about where they come from and the things that they put in place. However, when you're fined for inadequate fire protection systems or procedures, poor PPE and or supervision, and lack of emergency response protocols, that's those are three major areas to be fined in. And so to be able to appeal any of that and for OSHA to have enough teeth there to levy the fine based on those three, it's going to be an uphill battle. And let's circle back to this, though. The whole point of this is it is sad that someone lost their life. And that's the key takeaway from here. OSHA and Caterpillar have got to find a way to work together on this. Whether there's a fine involved, the fine gets appealed or not appealed or overturned, the most important thing is for the two of them to really figure out how this happened and make sure it never happens again. And then those learnings are taken to other employers and other workforces as well that might be in the same type of industry. But thermal and flame resistant PPE could have been used. Was it used? I don't know. I haven't read the actual report. Fire suppression systems. Again, for these to be levied against Caterpillar, it's pretty damning in some ways. But for Caterpillar to try to come back and say, we had everything in place, it definitely means that there's going to be a lot of meetings between Caterpillar and OSHA. And I applaud Caterpillar as well for thinking that they have enough stuff in place to appeal the fines, right? So that tells you a lot about their safety system as well and their safety culture. So I think this one will mesh itself out. I hope the two of them are able to figure it out. It is going to be probably a lot of head versus head butting. But I think ultimately, as long as the result is that we as a workforce and safety professionals find ways and we take learnings from this and we make sure that this on this young man's memory, this never happens again. That's what we got to work on here.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That at the end of the day, a life was lost, something happened, whether or not the workplace and his employers were responsible for that, that doesn't necessarily matter. All that matters is that everyone learns from the situation and is able to
Yeah.
move on and prevent something like this from happening. So, like I said, this case is currently still open. We'll keep an eye on it. And if there's any major updates, we'll definitely be sure to talk about that.
With as much attention as this is getting, I want to pay attention to this as well and see what actually happens, because this is a big news story, right? This is a huge employer. This is federal OSHA, right? And this is not a small fine. This is a pretty big fine. So on those three topics we talked about, those are pretty hard ones to prove that you had something in place to appeal the fine. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. As long as it's a positive outcome, I'm for it.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's all for the news this week. So now we're going to jump into our question and answer segment. So over at the safety professional subreddit, a great place to be in, great community there. It's been a really good place for safety professionals, both experienced in the industry, people that are just coming into safety management, and people that just have questions are able to talk with each other, get things worked out. So I don't know about you, Brian. I spend quite a bit of time over there looking at what are safety managers asking, what are questions that they need to know about, and what we're going to do is take a few of those questions, some of the more popular ones, some of the ones that come up pretty often, and we're going to walk through those.
I'm game for this. And as far as your Reddit comment, this is something that's fairly new to me. I know I'm an old man in this. I've never really messed around with Reddit so far, but I've been looking at it more, and they cover every topic under the sun over there on Reddit.
It's been really helpful for me as someone who doesn't have any experience in safety management to be able to step in people's shoes and see what their pain points are and how people are solving those. To get right into it, our first question today is about workplace discipline for noncompliance. So this comes from Electrical Task 9829. The situation that they have on their job site, they see some workers who aren't compliant with safety policies, and they're wondering who's responsible for disciplining these people and correcting them. I know it's a little bit complicated, but at an organization, say someone breaks a rule, they're not wearing their fall protection, they're not wearing their hard hat, who's responsible for correcting that issue? And then if it continues to happen, who should be responsible for taking care of this noncompliance issue?
So this kind of goes back to the age old fun dad versus mom. Who's the enforcer in the house? As a safety professional, you almost have to be both, right? But the reality is, as a safety professional, whether you're the safety advisor, safety manager, director, whatever your title might be, if you're going to be directly involved in any type of discipline, whether it's coaching, maybe termination, a write-up, whatever it might be, management also has to be involved, even if you are a member of management. And the reason being, I would say, from my experience, is as the safety professional, you have to almost be good cop and bad cop. You have to notify management of the non-compliance. You have to correct the non-compliance with the individual or individuals that it might be. You also have to be seen as the person that's going to pull them out of non-compliance, and that's going to be their friend and show them how to be compliant. So having management involved in any discipline come actually from management, and by management I mean whether it's operations manager or something along those lines. Obviously health and safety will be involved, will be the drivers of letting them know what the compliance or non-compliance was, what it's going to take to be in compliance, any advising as what type of training needs to be done, what type of coaching needs to be done, or if it's terminable offense, right? Because almost every company has their golden rules that, hey, if you violate these, you're terminated. It would make sure that management's involved, that we document it, we coach, and that we recommend. But at the end of the day, let HR be the bad guy, right? Let management, let HR and that side be the bad guy. Because as a health and safety professional, you do have to fall in that line. Like I said, good cop, bad cop. You have to be both at times. But at the end of the day, they cannot be afraid to come to you with maybe a non-compliance issue, right? Thinking that if they come to you, they're going to get fired, right? So you got to be able to carry that big stick, know when you need to use it, but at the same time, have open arms and make sure everyone comes to you.
Definitely. So, getting into our second question, this comes from user hazardous waste operations and emergency response training. And they're asking if anyone has experienced workplace violence, whether that's verbal abuse, bullying, something more serious, and how that's been handled on the job site before. So, Brian, let's turn that question over to you. Have you experienced workplace violence while on a job site?
Unfortunately, yes, on both sides of the fence. But it's one of these things that you cannot participate in. You have to immediately de escalate the situation, especially some of these more hazardous workplaces. This guy sounds like he deals with hazardous materials. I came from that industry for a while with a company based out of California. If you got into a scuffle on some of our job sites, you could easily be covered in acid. So de-escalation is number one thing, right? Walk away, get away, whatever it might be. And when it comes to workplace violence, you have to let someone know. You have to make sure that it gets taken care of, right? And that it doesn't happen again. It's not allowed to happen, right? Your
Definitely.
standards, they have to be very clear about there being a zero tolerance policy for workplace violence. Can't be allowed, has no place in work. The majority of work is done already with enough inherent risk that organizations like we talked about, OSHA exists because of the inherent risk involved in work. We don't need to introduce more of that with workplace violence. So, my number one recommendation, if you witness any workplace violence, or if you are subject to any workplace violence, or if you're the one that feels like taking Sam out behind the woodshed and letting him experience some workplace violence, stop, de escalate, get out of the situation, and just really think it through, right? Because violence has no place in the workplace.
Definitely. I agree with everything you just said. So, getting into our third question for the day. This is coming from user Sputnik Sweetass. That is an excellent username. Yeah, it sounds like they're in a little bit of a predicament. They're saying that their employer doesn't purchase suitable PPE. Reading through the post, they're talking about how usually it's a pain in the butt to get PPE on the job site. And when it does, it's usually secondhand, it's not in good working condition. Basically, what should they do? What I'm seeing here is the major situation is how do you get buy-in from management? How do you get management to care about safety and about providing that proper PPE, which in many cases is going to be essential for keeping your hands, your eyes, your legs safe from any serious injuries? And then what's the preference between using having gear that's used versus having brand new shiny stuff?
Yeah, so it's a tough one, right? Without knowing all the context, but it is an employer's responsibility to provide proper PPE, right? Especially for a specific task or specific hazards. Respiratory protection falls under that. Respiratory protection has to be issued to the individual, right? Hard hats, things like this. But to circle back to your very first question about how do you get buy in, sitting down, having those conversations with the supervisor on making them understand what the hazards are. I don't know if you have a safety professional there at your workplace, but if you do, it sounds like he needs to be a little more aware of what's actually going on the job site. As far as an employer's requirement to provide proper PPE, that is, there's no debate on it. It has to be done. Now, that being said, there is some debate on what is proper PPE. Sam, maybe you want bomber glasses, but you want all your safety glasses to be Oakley safety glasses. We buy UVEX safety glasses for $2 a pair. They're ANSI rated, they're ANSI approved, they serve all the same function, and they meet every need that we need, they meet. However, they don't look as cool as the Oakleys. Who's to say that you're not saying that's not proper? Maybe you think the Oakley's proper PPE. So a clear definition of PPE and the PPE needed definitely needs to be communicated to not only from the employer, but from the employee up to the employer to make sure that they are talking about the same things. PPE being multiple use or communal use, that does happen in certain types of PPE and certain types of task. It's assigned that PPE is maybe assigned to a location or a task versus an individual. That is a common practice, right? There are things that have to go in with that practice, such as making sure it's clean, making sure you can inspect it, making sure that it's free from any deficiencies. So that is a common practice. Using PPE that someone else has used, such as maybe a large Arctic jacket to go into a freezer. That might be something that where that PPE is a communal use versus buying everyone at the facility, all 200 people, an Arctic jacket that might be going into a freezer. So there are precedents for communal PPE use. It just has to be specific. It has to meet the task, right? And it has to be of good quality. And OSHA says that in all their PPE verbiage is that PPE has to be enough to meet that hazard, make sure to protect the workforce, and that has to be of good quality, right? So I think as long as you're ensuring that your employer is following the OSHA guidelines, I believe we're talking in the 1910s.126, like that's about footwear. As long as we're talking about that and we're meeting those guidelines and you're making sure your employer is meeting those guidelines, then you're good. How would I make sure that's happening if my employer is not wanting to? That's where it's going to be a little bit more, might run into some issues. No one wants to be the person that goes to OSHA and files a complaint against their workplace. But at a certain point, if they are not getting you the proper PPE and they are putting you in an unsafe position, that's why organizations like OSHA exist, right? To empower the worker and make sure that the worker has everything that they need to work safely.
Many years ago, I worked for the Forest Service just as a seasonal worker. It was a high risk job. We were out in the mountains all day. We were looking at trees, doing ecological surveys. And a lot of times we were out there cutting down dangerous trees. So it was a big range of different job responsibilities that carried just an inherent level of risk. So
Right.
usually every day, every employee had gloves, they had fire boots that everybody wore, and they had hard hats and safety glasses. And a lot of these things, you would get your own gear, you would get your own glasses, you would get your own gloves. And usually there's a big box of gloves. So if you wore through yours, which was pretty common,
Right.
use a glove for a couple of weeks and eventually you're going to end up with holes in it. You could just go grab another pair of gloves. There were definitely some other things, like whenever you were working with chainsaws, not
Yeah.
everybody had their own personal pair of chainsaw chaps, which are
Right.
essential if you're cutting through a tree. You don't want the saw to bounce off the tree and hit you in the
No.
leg. But also, not everybody needs a pair of these at all times. So, like you mentioned with communal gear, sometimes there are some things like eye protection. Everybody should have those and they should work, and
Yeah.
they shouldn't just create another piece of plastic that's going to go into your eye. This is a conversation between, again, like we've mentioned previously, between safety professionals, employees, and managers to be able to figure out what's the best thing for their organization.
No, and you're 100% right. When you make sure that you're supplying high quality PPE to your workforce, and I've done this over 20 years, what I've found is the better quality stuff that I get them and that I provide for them, one, it does two things. It shows we really care as a company, right? They also take pride in having that set of safety glasses or that carbon fiber hard hat, or maybe it's a special cut gloves by the best company possible versus maybe one from Walmart, right? When you get people high quality PPE, they also take ownership of it, right? When I've bought the quote disposable PPE that you could buy a box of safety glasses, a dozen of them for $10, that's exactly how they get treated. As soon as maybe they get a little bit of dust on them, or maybe even the slightest bit of fog in them, they throw them away and they go get a new pair. So you do have to have a conversation and you have to really look at your culture and you have to really look at what's available. And I am a proponent of getting quality PPE and making sure that you're really investing in your PPE, but you're also investing in your people and you're communicating that investment in your PPE to your people. And they do take a little bit of pride in that. They will take ownership.
Definitely. And for anyone worried about cost too, I could be wrong on this, but in the past, I've seen that any money put into safety, you end up getting that paid back through return on investment. Usually, about, I think it's for every dollar that you put into safety, you end up getting $4 back. And a lot of that comes from by investing in your safety program, you prevent serious injuries from happening. You keep people on the job, you keep things running efficiently. Ultimately, spending that $20, $30 on a pair of glasses for someone is going to cost way less than if they get injured, you have to pay out workers' comp, and they're off the job for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You don't need to break the bank to manage an effective safety program. The money that you put into it will end up paying off in the end.
No, you're 100% right. That ROI on PPE is, it's almost unmeasurable, really, because you don't know until you actually have an incident where maybe that cut resistant glove actually stops the individual from getting cut. But how many near misses did you have, or how many this or that did you have? The ROI PPE is almost unmeasurable. So you're 100% right on that.
Awesome. So just to get into our next question, this comes from user Sneaky Tiger. And
Dude,
basically what they're, some of these usernames are great.
but Nick Sweet Ass and
Um,
Sneaky Tiger, these guys are making me come up like, because I'm going to finally go on Reddit and get a username. This is opening my eyes. I got to bring my A game when I'm thinking of these usernames.
Definitely. Yeah, it's tricky to find a good one, but when you nail one, you definitely nail it. So, what they're talking about, they're posting that they just recently accepted a job offer as a loss control consultant with a large insurance broker. So, basically, what they're asking in the process of applying for this job, they were told that moving into the insurance industry isn't a good idea for safety professionals, that essentially it's a dead end for their career. So they were just asking, first of all, is this true? Should safety professionals stay in safety, or do they have these opportunities to branch out into other industries with maybe a slightly different focus? And then one thing I was wondering is, what are a few good industries that safety pros can move into besides just working construction, working in mining, working at factories?
And that's a good question. And for me, being in the insurance side and being a risk manager or a risk control or loss control consultant has a lot of opportunities, right? It has a lot of places to go, right? I wouldn't call it a dead end at all. If you're a seasoned safety professional or if you're on your way to becoming a seasoned safety professional, I like to say this about being in health and safety. It's almost limitless. You can really go anywhere. Every industry nowadays has some sort of health and safety. And outside of just being a safety professional, one of my biggest recommendations, and that I've got to personally take as well, is becoming project managers, right? Or even operation managers. When you have that background of being health and safety, you're very fluid. You're used to having everything being very dynamic, being very flexible, being able to, whilst knowing compliance and enforcing compliance and regulatory needs, still having the management experience of getting the job done, finding out how to make a lot happen with a very little. That sounds like a project manager. So, project management is a really good one for safety pros to look at. Any type of management, really, safety consulting rather than working for a company, going out on your own. You gain this experience from working within the health and safety world that, and the experience that you get even teaching that and training people during the your work, there's a field for that and there's a niche for that, and people want good quality health and safety trainers. So being a safety consultant is another great way for a safety pro to leave an organization and have maybe more runway for their future. Same with training. And I'm a perfect example of this. EHS software, right? Right now, I'm working with Mojo AI, and I absolutely love this. And I'm working on being the health and safety director here for Safety Mojo. And we offer a great product. And I love having the experience that I have had over the last 20 years in the field and bringing that to the platform. So there's so many different areas that a health and safety pro can then go on into. And whether that be operations, project management, the insurance sector, it's almost limitless. And this is why when I'm talking with veterans about what they're going to do after the military, I encourage them more so than anything to get into health and safety. Because once you're in health and safety and you become proficient, not everyone, but once you become a good one and you become proficient, you could almost write your ticket anywhere you want to go. Does that make sense to you, Sam?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I've done a little bit of research into different industries that safety managers can go into just for an article that we're going to be publishing soon. But a few that come to mind that I thought were really interesting to learn about: casinos, in
Yeah.
especially in Las Vegas, but everywhere. They have safety managers, they have safety professionals working there.
Yeah.
You also have hospitals, you have even the film industry. And while these
Yeah.
industries maybe aren't necessarily looking for someone to keep their workers falling in through a roof every day, a lot of them are dealing with people that are in close contact with each other in a hospital. You have to worry about airborne
Yeah.
pathogens. You have to worry about whether or not different chemicals or medications are being properly administered. And even in the film industry, you have people interfacing with each other all day. And you can have anything from massive pyrotechnics on set to moving
100%.
vehicles to even Tom Cruise strapped to the back of a plane. And someone has to be there to make sure that everyone's making it home safely at the end of the day.
There's so many different industries out there, whether it's those ones that you listed or a number of others. Every single thing that you could think of nowadays has some sort of health and safety professional or some sort of need for quality health and safety professionals. And that's why I think it's the ultimate career move for anyone that is willing to put in the hard work, stay focused, and continuously educate themselves and improve. It's the most rewarding career path out there in the industry, I think.
So, to get into our fifth question, this one comes from user GTA Living. They're wondering, how do you manage burnout as a safety pro? So,
Mm,
in their post, they're talking about how they're working for a big company and
yeah.
they get a ton of random initiatives thrown at them. And they're struggling to get those done while also
Yeah.
working to make sure the safety program is effective, to the point where it's starting to affect their mental health. They say that they feel like they're drowning. So, Brian,
Yeah.
have you ever experienced burnout or known anyone that's felt burned out on a job site?
So this is a very real thing. This is, oh man, this one getting triggered a little bit here. But no, absolutely. And it's very easy to get that sensation of feeling like you're drowning, especially when management or operational needs are changing so much and priorities are constantly shuffling. One thing you have to do is you have to put your own priorities into it, right? You have to take operations priorities and everything. And don't get me wrong, we all have to work together, but you have to make sure that you're prioritizing your time, right? And your effort in the right direction. And if that's being pulled away by something that represents a less hazard or something that's going to have even a less impact than what you're working on, you have to have the wherewithal to stand up, right? And say, hey, we'll work on that. I'm going to finish this first. But that sensation of feeling like you're a firefighter or you're just running around fighting fires everywhere, you're not doing yourself any good or your organization. So, my biggest recommendation for this is two things and some things that I'm still working on: time management. Health and safety professionals, for some reason, we seem to be the worst at time management as a group because of things that you just said. We tend to get pulled, we allow ourselves to get pulled in so many different directions that we will stretch ourselves way too thin. Finding project priorities, time management, and also establishing a rapport with groups that you could actually delegate some of this to. You do have to look at some of these ever changing priorities and realize, is this really something that needs to be worked on by me, or can this be delegated to maybe this shift or this group of people, and you can empower them and have them work on it, and maybe you manage them while you focus on the higher priorities. That's key, right? That's time management, delegating when possible, celebrating small wins. If you, as you do get things accomplished, make sure that it's celebrated, it's done, and then you move on to the next one, right? But as a health and safety professional, you can't let yourself get overwhelmed. You need to do what's best for the company and make sure that your workforce is being safe and that you have everything in place to make sure that's a reality. You have to make sure that's your priority. And any changing priorities, any additional priorities to that, that your main goal supersedes and everything else is subservient to that priority. Does that make sense there, Sam?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a pretty firm believer that the best thing you can do in any job is take care of yourself. If you feel like you're struggling to get something done because of changing initiatives or because the workload is overwhelming, letting it affect you mentally and not setting proper boundaries to make sure that you're able to keep going is definitely not going to help.
As a health and safety professional, if you're getting burnt out and you're letting it affect you and you're, say, maybe you're getting anxious, maybe you're getting a bit moody, that might be the one time that someone really needs to come to you, and they're not going to come to you because you snapped at them because you're stressed out over your workload or whatever it might be. This is one of these things that you, as a safety professional, have to make sure that you're prioritizing not only your goals and your time, but that you're also, like you said, setting those boundaries. Hey, we can't move off to this until this is done, or whatever it might be. And that way, you're setting clear expectations, you're setting boundaries, and you're not letting it affect your day to day interactions with your workforce that's depending on you to establish and maintain that safety culture. In that type of scenario that you're talking about, where the priorities are constantly changing and the workload is just being dumped and dumped, that sounds like it's more driven by compliance, right? Rather than safety being an integral part of the culture. So really looking at your safety culture as well and making sure that it's part of line management. The safety manager and safety professional at a facility should never be responsible for all the safety aspects of that facility. No one should ever really say that's the safety person's job, right? It should be a line management portion where we're all responsible for this. They're responsible for ensuring that we make sure that we're in compliance with all regulatory needs, that all the training's up to date, all the aspects of management that needs to be done is checked. But they cannot be the firefighter out there going 20 different directions on a daily basis.
Our final question today comes from Fundog8854. They're talking about how in 2018 they got out of the military and they were working as a bioenvironmental engineer in the Air Force for about 2.5 years. And then since then, they've worked in other industries, they've done different jobs, but they want to get back into safety. But they're finding that as they're applying for jobs, because of that massive gap, about a 7-year gap in their resume where they didn't have any safety related jobs, they're getting passed up on a bunch of different positions. They were wondering if getting an associate safety professional certification is a good place to start to get back into safety.
Yeah, any certification is going to help you by all means. Some you can get maybe a little bit quicker. Maybe some carry more weight than others. Like a CSP is kind of the gold standard for safety professionals through the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. But any certification is going to help you. Also, setting your expectations on what type of job you're going to get in health and safety is probably a good place to start too. If there's been a bit of a gap in that you're being passed up for these jobs, maybe look at the jobs that you're applying for. Are you applying for director jobs? Or are you applying for manager jobs? Are there coordinator jobs? Are there advisor level jobs that you could be applying for? I say this about anyone from the military. Make sure that you're not doing yourself a disservice and you're not highlighting all the safety experience that you have from the military. Being in the military, everything is regulated, right? Everything's policies and procedures, everything's SOP driven, everything is driven by safety as well, right? So make sure you're highlighting those aspects on your resume. Look into a number of different safety certifications. The ASP is amazing, it will get you a long ways. However, if you're maybe looking at utility work, there's certified utility safety practitioner certifications that You could take almost predominantly online, take the test, everything. You could have that in maybe a month, right? So look at the industries you're applying to, look at the certifications that could be applied to those specific industries. And then what I would say when it comes to safety certification, build your foundation out, right? Whether it's a CHST, whether it's a cost program, maybe through oshtrain.com, training.com. There's a number of ways out there to get different health and safety certifications. A really good one is NASP, North American Safety Professionals. They offer great training in, like we mentioned, BCSP. Go on there, look at their different certifications and start there. And then it's nice to be able to work your way up because some of those, like the CSP, they require a 4-year degree, which you may or may not have. However, there are other certifications that you can get in the meantime while you're building up to that.
Definitely. I think what you mentioned about looking at the experience that you already have in the field that you're in, it's not just military. I've talked to people who have been in law enforcement.
You want to look at what crosses over, right? And everyone wants to automatically try to go and get a CSP or ASP, and that's absolutely fantastic. However, where I've seen a lot of success is go get your foundation, right? Go get your OSHA 500s, go get your HAZWOPER, lay your foundation in the practical knowledge base of health and safety and the regulatory base. And then you build up from there and you build on top of that. And like we're talking about, you use your crossover experience, whether it's from the medical field, law enforcement, military, a number of things. Don't discount that experience and really bring that into a package. And I think that really makes for a good health and safety professional. But if I was advising someone that was just starting out, had a little bit of experience like this gentleman from the military, but didn't have actual documented health and safety experience, and he's talking about what certificate do I go get? I would start with my OSHA 500s. I would start with some of the foundational stuff and maybe grab like a 233-hour program from one of the vendors that offers it that could help you get your certifications. And when you're interviewing and they're looking at your resume, it's going to show that you're investing in yourself and that you're in the process of becoming a more well-rounded health and safety professional or professional candidate.
So that's been all of our questions for this week. Thanks everyone for listening. And I really hope that this has been helpful. Like I said, this is something that we're planning to do every week. So we'll be back with more safety questions. But in the meantime, if you want to submit any of your own questions, feel free to send them to marketing@getmojo AI, and we'll see if we're able to answer those. If you want to stay up to date on Mojo AI and Safety Mojo, our safety management app, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you want to check out any of these platforms or follow us, really appreciate that. You can check out those links in the show description. And then finally, if you like the show, please subscribe and share. This helps expand our reach and gets us noticed so that we can help even more safety professionals. Brian, where can people find you?
Yeah, probably the best social media to find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name there. You can find me here at brian.camper at Mojo AI or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I hope everyone has a great week. And remember, stay safe out there.